lighting is not that bad as it seems from my side. So, I'm gonna continue from where I left last time. The book is An Era of Darkness by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and the discussion video is 2. This is a second video in which we are going to continue discussing this book. And we left on the first page's end of the chronology of principal events mentioned in the book. Okay, so I'm going to continue from the second page of the chronology, and if you might be wondering about what this book is about, and you might need an overview of this book's crux, what it contains, uh, what it imparts. So you will have to check the discussion first or on this book, which is my latest video in the live section of my YouTube channel. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so we're gonna continue from we left on the timeline event of year 1787 till 1795. Okay, and from 1787 till 1795, the comments written in front of it are that the British Parliament impeaches Warren Hastings, Governor General of Bengal, who was in fact the Governor General of Bengal from 1774 to 1785. And the reason for impeachment was misconduct. Okay, so just I have, to be honest, from my last video, I have decided that there is one thing I can include in my videos. Like, for example, if I am discussing anything in the book, and there might be some technical terms that usual student of history or economic history or whatever may not be familiar with. So I'm gonna give a brief overview and what's the exact meaning of that word, and I'm gonna move on after that. Okay, so the word impeachment. Impeachment is basically impeachment can be done of a person who holds a public office on behalf of any state or government. It is usually This word is usually used in on the backdrop of some government situation. Okay, so impeachment is basically a kind of investigation, a kind of inquiry of a person. So in that regard, basically there were some, as discussed in my first video where I discussed the previous timeline of the events mentioned in this book. There were some discrepancies, there were some irregularities going on, and there was some kind of miscoordination and miscommunication going on between the Governor General and the Viceroys appointed by the British Parliament at that time, and the person who is dealing on the ground with Indians, okay, on behalf of the British. So there was some misunderstanding, some miscommunication, some issues going on between the crown, between the government, which is sitting in the Great Britain, and the person, the viceroys, the ambassadors, which are carrying on their work, the government's work on their behalf in India at that time, when the East India Company kind of showed its true colors to the Mughal Empire, to Marathas, to everyone in the subcontinent. So on that basis, the British government found some irregularities, some misconduct issues, and they decided to impeach the governor, that time Governor General of Bengal, Warren Hastings. Okay, so this is the one event. After that, in 1793, British under Lord Cornwallis introduced the permanent settlement of the land revenue system. Okay, so I do not have any detailed information about this, maybe this regarding this particular event, when the exact timeline in the upcoming chapters arrive, then the author may disclose the exact details about what is going on here. Okay, about on this particular timeline of 1793, about the land revenue system. Okay, and after that, in 1799, Tipu Sultan is killed in the battle against 5,000 British soldiers who stormed and razed his capital in Srirangapatna. Okay, so Tipu Sultan's capital was in Srirangapatna, which is, I think, the modern day. It is based in Karnataka state of India, current India. Okay, so this timeline basically covers that the British soldiers basically kind of stormed into Tipu Sultan's capital, its palace and all, etc., and killed him. Okay, along with 500 British soldiers. um, After that, mind you, before this event, before this 1799's particular event, Tipu Sultan actually defeated British army in the earlier battle. Okay, and after that, in the next timeline event of 1803, Second Anglo-Maratha War results in British capture of Delhi and the control of large parts of India. Okay, so in this specific battle between the Marathas and the Britons, uh, in the year 1803, basically the British finally got the control of Delhi and the major parts of Indian subcontinent. Okay, after that, 1806, in year 1806, Vellore mutiny ruthlessly suppressed. Okay, so for those who don't know about the word mutiny, what does it mean exactly? Mutiny, in terms of, it is a word which is usually used in the backdrop of a military, um, you can say, military backdrop. Okay, when some soldiers, when a group of a large number of soldiers basically deny to accept the orders from the, or follow the orders from the higher command, then it is called a mutiny. And the British usually use the word mutiny in when they discuss colonization, their colonization or any colonization, which is usually because Britain are the colonizers in most of the e- historical events. So they usually use the word mutiny. But if you will read any Indian author or any author who is writing from the subject's perspective, who were ruled by the British, then they would usually use the term revolt. Okay, so revolt is a term which is used as an uprising. Okay, so we don't want to follow your rules, we don't want to adhere to your system, just go to hell, that kind of stuff. So the first, okay, so usually we all study about the Great War of Independence if we study from an Indian perspective of 1857. But there were, and the Great Mutiny or the Sepoy Mutiny, which the British usually call it. British authors call it Sepoy Mutiny, and the Indian authors, or the Indian, all the political activists who, when they need to refer to the 1857 War of Independence, they usually call it the War of Independence. Okay, so it is a bit of an interesting fact here that before that all out War of Independence, which happened in 1857 between the British and the Indians, um, there was an uprising in Vellore. This is a city in India, and this was the in 1806. This was the first uprising that carried out against the Britons, against the British government, and it was ruthlessly suppressed. It was, cruel cruelly suppressed by the British in a day or so. So it was not the mutiny did not kept lingering on for months like the one which happened in 1857. This was the first one that got this was the first uprising, but it got suppressed easily by the Britons. Okay. After that, the next timeline event happens in, as per the book, it happens in 1825, and the comment in front of it says that first massive migration of Indian workers from Madras to Reunion and Mauritius. Okay, so this is also a quite an interesting fact to know about that one a person who is reading this comment, like the people, like the Indian workers migrated from their homeland to Mauritius, which is in East Africa. It is an island in the eastern African side. You can say adjacent to another a bit larger island known as Madagascar. Okay, so if you will Google Mauritius, you will get to know the exact location what I'm talking about here. Um, so why the Indian laborers migrated from their homeland all the way to the Eastern African side of the world? Why? Well, the background of this situation is that basically in Mauritius, in because British did not only rule in India at that time, they also ruled in African continent. They also ruled in various other, in like I mentioned in my previous video, like China, like US. But I think if we check the exact 1825, yeah, that at that particular time the US got liberated. So there were several other colonies of the British in which they were carrying out their works for, obviously, for profit purposes, like they conquered India. And there were many in Mauritius and in, for example, in South Africa, etc. There were many sugar plantations that needed to be catered with. And since the British abolished slavery before this particular year, so they could not just they could not just buy slaves like they used to do, when they migrated all the slaves from west coast of Africa to the US for tea plantation, etc. They could not do that at this point, so they basically kind of force those Indian people to migrate to Mauritius and to other parts of their colonies around the world, British colonies around the world, and they force them to the work, and that's why the Indians had to migrate around the world in order to carry out the Britishers' work for a better profit, because slavery was abolished and the Indian labor was cheap and they were forced. Basically, this is, in technical terms, it is called indentured labor. Like, you cannot get out of this laborious work by your choice. You will have to do it either way, and with any rate, at any amount of money that British government will offer you at that point in time. Okay, so this was a forced migration uh, done by the Indians, which was forced to made to be done by the British at that time. Okay, that's why the Indians migrated to the Mauritius and other parts of the colonies of the British government at that time. Okay, so moving on, 1825 we have discussed, and after that in 1828, the next timeline event is in 1828, and the comment says Ram Mohan Roy founds Adi Brahmo Samaj in Calcutta, first movement to initiate socio-religious reforms. Influenced by Islam and Christianity, he denounces polytheism, idol worship, and more. Okay, so to cut it a bit short and to get it to the point, Ram Mohan Roy, Raja Ram Mohan Roy was a reformer. Basically, in if you study the Indian subcontinent's history, he was a reformer who spoke against various you can say cultures, you can say practices, which are mostly Hindu practices. For example, he spoke against sati. Sati was a practice usually done by Hindus at that time. That sati was basically that if in a case of a couple who's married to each other, if the husband dies, then the woman, his wife, will have to get to burn herself alive. Okay, so this was sati in a nutshell, and she will be forced to get burned alive. And there were many other, you can say, these kind of rituals, these kind of cultures, especially of Hinduism, against which Ram Mohan Roy spoke, and he kind of took a social religious movement to reform the Indian society and all. Okay, so this was a guy who basically he launched the movement of Adi Brahmo Samaj, in which he did all this, which I just mentioned. And he started from Calcutta, first movement to initiate social religious reform, as I mentioned, influenced by Islam and Christianity. He denounced polytheism. Okay, and polytheism is basically worshipping several gods. Okay, not one, several gods. So this is the meaning of polytheism, and yeah, that's I think that's about it for the comment. Idol worship and more. After that, in the year 1835, the next timeline comment says, in 1835, Macaulay's Minute furthers Western education in India. English is made official government and court language. So, in the during the time of British rule, the exact year in which English was made official government and court language of the subcontinent was 1835. After that, in the same year, 1835, Mauritius receives 19,000 migrant indentured laborers from India. Workers continue to be shipped to Mauritius till 1922. Okay, so this comment basically gives a detail of everything that I just mentioned before. That the 19,000 this comment basically gives the exact figure of how much laborers from India got to force migrate from India to Mauritius. Okay, and these workers got to be shipped continued this migration continued till 1922. After that, in 1837, Kali worshipping thugs suppressed by the British. It must be some event that I don't know at the moment, so maybe this event comes in the upcoming chapter, so we will discuss it in detail at that point. In 1839, preacher William Howitt attacks British rule in India. Okay, so this is some preacher. I don't know exactly whether he's from the Great Britain or from some any other country, but he criticized, outlandishly criticized British rule in India. And after that, 1843, British conquered the Sindh region, present-day Pakistan. British promulgate the doctrine of lapse, under which a state is taken over by the British whenever a ruler dies without an heir. Okay, so this is very interesting point. Basically, what the British did, they basically formed a rule on their own because they were in power in the subcontinent, so no one could challenge their rules and regulations and all etc. At this point, they basically formed a rule that, as you know, that at that point in the mid 19th century, there were several princely states in the whole subcontinent. Okay, there was the state of Bahawalpur, there was the state of Hyderabad, Deccan, there was the state of Maharashtra, and so on. So basically, British government formed a rule that if in any of these princely states, the current ruler dies without declaring any heir, like any person who is going to take care of that particular state after his demise. If he's not going to declare that an heir for this responsibility regarding the princely state, then the British Ghana is going to straight up take over that princely state under its own authority, and the status of princely state will get lapsed. Okay, so this is as simple as that. And even if in some texts it says that even if some king or ruler of that princely state does not have a son who can does not have a son, because at that point only men used to rule. So if a ruler did not had a son to rule that princely state after his demise, after that particular ruler's demise, then British will going to take over that state regardless of what the will of the people of that princely state is. Okay, so moving on, British conqueror. Okay, yeah. In the year 1853, first railway established between Bombay and Thane. So this is the first railway track that the British established in the subcontinent, you can say. Um, and after that, in 1857, okay, so the exact timeline, the exact year of which Indians mostly know about. Okay, first major Indian revolt, called the Sepoy Mutiny by the British, ends in a few months with the fall of Delhi and Lucknow. Okay, so this is the main event, one of the main core events in the history of subcontinent, that the all of the subcontinent gets under the control of British after the War of Independence, or if we say it from the British point of view, it's the Sepoy Mutiny. After that, and yeah, one thing is that it the the British took many months before it got to crush these mutiny completely. Okay, so British had a hard time fighting the Indians this because the scale of this mutiny was much bigger than the mutiny we discussed earlier of the Vellore that happened in Vellore. Okay, so the scale of this mutiny was much higher, was much wider as compared to the Vellore mutiny, and it basically spread across the subcontinent at that time. Okay, so after that, 1858, 1858. So the prominent event from 1858 is Queen Victoria's proclamation taking over in the name of the Crown, the governance of India from the East India Company. Civil service jobs in India are open to Indians. Okay, so this is basically just a power shift from I mean, before 1858, the whole power, the whole control of subcontinent was in the British government's hand, but through the East India Company. But in 1858, basically, the British government passed a law that bypassed the East India Company and the British government ruled directly. The Queen Victoria, basically now ruled directly on the subcontinent instead of through some company, East India Company in this case. Okay, and civil service jobs got open to Indians after 1 year of the War of Independence. Um, in the same year, 1858, India completes first 200 miles of railway track. Okay, so the first railway track, as we discussed in the timeline earlier, got established between Bombay and Thane in 1853, and in 1858, the first 200 miles of railways got completed in the subcontinent. Okay, and just to mention, like people usually praise the British government to to lay a network of whole railways in the subcontinent, but they usually forget about the fact that that railway was not to benefit the local Indians, us. It was the purpose of that railway tracks was mainly to extract our resources and get them back to the Great Britain, and like all the collectibles, like all the spices, all the anaj, etc. You can say Russian, etc. They use those tracks to extract our resources, our 27% of GDP, and extract it back to their country, Great Britain. Okay, and in 1860, the timeline says SS Truro and SS Belvedere dock in Durban, South Africa, carrying first indentured servants from Madras and Calcutta to work sugar plantations. So this is what I have already discussed. Like I have explained to you while discussing the Mauritius migration to Mauritius by the Indians, that why migration happened, used to happen. It was basically a forced migration, and in that same particular way, the migration also happened to Durban in South Africa to do the same work of British Raj, uh, but because Indian labor was quite cheap, so that's why they were forced to do the work. After that, in 1861, the most prominent event of 1861 is Rabindranath Tagore is born. Okay, and he died in 1941. So Rabindranath Tagore was quite an influential figure in Indian subcontinent history, and he was a poet. Basically, he had an expertise in literature, and he was to be honest, one of the first, I think he was the first non-European person to win a Nobel Prize in literature. Okay, so do Google Rabindranath Tagore and his contributions to the subcontinent, literature and philosophy and all. In 1863, the most prominent event of 1863 mentioned in this book is Swami Vivekanand is born. Okay, so if there are any Indians that are listening to me right now, they surely must know about who this brilliant guy was. Um, he was basically a philosopher. He was one of the main disciples of then mystic named Ramakrishna. Okay, and he has contributed a lot to the Indian thinking, to the Indian society fabric, and his sayings and his philosophies are still propagated on social media, different social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., in the form of quotations. Okay, so he was quite an accomplished person. After that, in the year 1866, at least 1.5 million Indians die in the Orissa famine. Okay, so in this year, this was the very first famine, a major famine under the British Raj in the subcontinent in Orissa, which is a state in India. Um, and as it is mentioned here, 1.5 million, 1.5 million people died on the British Raj's watch due to the famine. And why the famine was caused in the first place, you can say, yeah, well, there are various reasons why a famine gets caused, like due to some weather conditions that year, because the economy of subcontinent was highly dependent on the agriculture side of things back in the day at that point in time, but also due to the mismanagement and you can say irresponsible behavior of British Raj, because they did not care about us, they did not care about the well-being of the people here. So that's why they did not do anything proactively on this regard and in this regard, and hence the a famine which could have been, you can say, mitigated to a great extent, got so vast that 1.5 million people died. So after that, the last timeline event on this page is from 1869 to 1948. This is, I think, this is a general information about the overall context of Indian subcontinent history of British Raj and the freedom fighters who fought for independence. That lifetime of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Indian nationalist and political activist who developed the strategy of non-violence, non-violent disobedience that forces Christian Great Britain to grant independence to India. Okay, so you must have known, you must know about who was uh, Gandhi, and he was one of the most successful freedom fighters in subcontinent, and I would like to say that in world history, in recorded in modern world history, that Gandhiji was he led by example. Today, even today, in today's protests around the world, he is often quoted. His strategies of that time are often adopted in the biggest protests around the world. And one of the main features, one of the main, you can say, in terms of marketing, we usually say it's the unique selling point. What is the unique selling point of a particular person? So, in case of Gandhiji, it was his ideology of non-violence, that he used to believe in that we will get what we want, but we will not get violent for it, otherwise our cause will get disturbed big time. And he was right. And yeah, so this was his a bit of an introduction at the end of this page in the timeline events. Still there are a couple of pages left for of covering of all of this complete timeline on which this complete book is based. So it's gonna be very interesting, and I think this is a long video. This is enough for this, for the second part of this book's discussion. And I will, if you have any questions regarding this book, if you have any question regarding what I just mentioned in this particular part, or overall throughout any, regarding any point, regarding any certain event, any timeline point in the Indian history, please do let me know in the comment section. I would like to have an engaging conversation, a constructive conversation on history, on Indian subcontinent history, and yeah, we can share our learnings from these subcontinent history discussions. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in the next one.